In this video, we're going to take a look at foreign exchange, and the example I've picked is of an FX brokerage. So I've started with a Corvil topology view, which is a great way to understand and visualize the environment that's being monitored. So for an FX broker, there's really three things that they need to get visibility into. Firstly, the performance of the rates that are coming in from the markets. Secondly, the performance of their own infrastructure. And then thirdly, how their clients are receiving those quotes and trading off them. So let's firstly take a look at the rates that are coming in from the markets at the top left. And in this case, we're looking at the ICAP, EBS A and B feeds, and we're tracking the relative latency between them. Now, we have another video that goes into much more detail on market data and tracking the quality of it, so please check that out. And then if we move on to the broker infrastructure, we can see here the orange Corvil icons represent where we're monitoring the traffic. So firstly, at the feed ingress on the left-hand side, but then also as we hand over the quotes to the clients on the right-hand side. The key component here is the pricing engine. It's taking the rates from the markets, it's generating quotes and sending those out to the clients. Now, it's really important that there isn't excessive latency across the pricing engine, because if there is, then potentially there's a risk of an arbitrage opportunity and the broker could get picked off. So Corvil's actually correlating the inbound rates with the outbound quotes and calculating the latency for each message. Then over on the right-hand side, we're sending quotes out to the clients. In practice, there's going to be a service provider network between the handoff point here and the traders themselves. So a key metric we're monitoring here is the quote to order latency. And that's important because if a trader attempts to place an order off a stale quote and the market's moved, that order is likely to get rejected. So the quote to order latency gives us a good sense of the responsiveness of those clients. And then finally, as those orders come back into us, we're tracking the order to act latency between the inbound orders and the outbound execution reports that go back to the client. We can then also track any orders that go out to the markets to be matched. So let's take a look at a workflow and investigate a particular client who's been complaining of performance. In the client dashboard, we're seeing a breakdown of activity for all our clients. So on the left-hand side here, we're seeing a breakdown of the notional value that's been traded. And on the right-hand side, we're also seeing a breakdown of quotation activity that's going out to our clients. Across the top here, we have some high-level numbers. So we're tracking here the notional value traded in US dollars. Now, in practice, our clients are trading many different currency pairs, but Corvil's actually performing a calculation to convert all those trades back into a base currency of US dollars, which is the number we see here. We also see the average trade size, number of trades, and also things like rejects and stalls, which we're going to take a look at in a little while. But all these numbers are interactive. So, for example, I could click on that reject there to bring up a time series and see exactly when that occurred and who was affected. All right. Now, as we scroll further down, we're seeing a breakdown of client order activity. So we're seeing how much they've traded per client, but also the latency performance, number of orders, rejects, and so on. And then over on the right-hand side, an aggregated view of order response time over time. Below it, we're looking at the quotations, again broken down by client. We can see here the numbers of messages that they're being sent, and also some network layer statistics around the health of that connection. And then over at the bottom right, that all-important pricer latency, which again, if you remember, is the time taken from an inbound rate to be converted to an outbound quote to one of our clients. And we can see here that's tracking quite high from time to time. In this case, it's gone up to over 700 milliseconds. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a workflow. One of our clients has rung up complaining that we're sending them stale quotes, and that's actually affecting their trading and the bottom line of their business. Their name's Bergman, so let's just take a look and see if we can spot them here. They're actually top of the list, so they're actually doing the most trades today, the most traded value. And we can actually see on the order side that their latencies are pretty low. So this is the order to act latency. It's in fact better than most others there. If we just have a look down at the quotations, again, we can see when in this case they rank number 2 in terms of quotes that they're receiving. But one thing that's standing out here is that they're advertising zero window size. And this is an indication that they may have a problem actually on their side. So this is something we should definitely investigate and take a closer look. So all I need to do is click on their name. I get presented with a few options, and I'm going to pick the option at the bottom here to go and look at their activity in more detail. So we're now specifically looking at the activity for our client Bergman. And if I wanted to, I could toggle to any of the other clients that we're monitoring as well as a comparison. Okay, across the top, we're seeing those high-level numbers that we were tracking before for everybody, but now just for Bergman. And below it, we've introduced another tier looking at the individual currency pairs that they're trading. As we scroll down, we're looking at firstly the order flow from Bergman. So we can see the response times of when we receive the orders from them to how quickly we send the execution report back to them. That's pretty stable. It's tracking at around 4 milliseconds. And we've also got detail on the right hand side about which currency pairs they're trading and when. As we come down further, we can now see that all important pricer latency. And indeed, there's that high latency spike we saw earlier of just over 700 milliseconds. I've also got here a time series, a breakdown of the key currency pairs that are being quoted as well. Now, what's interesting is that these guys seem to have some sort of a problem because they're advertising a zero window size very regularly. And that's an indication that something's not quite right on their side, that they can't actually cope with the stream of quotes that we're sending, and they've signaled back to us to stop sending. And we also see the microburst activity as well, which is fairly stable. So what I think we should do is to drill into this high latency that we've tracked across the pricing engine. And all I need to do is to click on here to drill down further. Drilling into that spike has brought up a 5-minute period of activity. And here we see all the quotations within that 5-minute period. So each one's recorded with a timestamp, an accurate timestamp. We're tracking the latency of rates to quote. We see here the comp ID of that particular client. We then also got the quote ID itself, what the currency pair is. So a lot of information there around the individual quotes. If we scroll down a little bit further, we've got the details here around the performance of that pricing engine. You can see it's pretty good. It's sub-millisecond, it's down in the microseconds. But then we do have this very large latency spike that stands out from everything else. There's actually a couple of them there, and they're a long way from the baseline that we saw. You've then also got a breakdown of the different currency pairs that are getting quoted over time. And as we scroll down, we then start seeing behavior on the client side. So we're tracking the bandwidth on both sides going in and out to the client. We see microburst activity. But then one thing I want to focus in on is the TCP zero window advertisements that client is sending out. And what's particularly telling here is that they line up exactly with when we see a higher latency reported on the pricing engine. So let's take a closer look. I'm just going to zoom in to this high spike here where we have a few messages within that time period. And if we come back up to our messages, this has now zoomed us into 11 seconds from 5 minutes. And there's the one over 700 milliseconds. And it's worth taking a look at this. So I'm going to click down into Event Inspection where we can conduct some further analysis. And we can see immediately here that it's lit up in orange because it's exceeded a latency threshold that's been set. Now in Corvil, we're able to track that message through the infrastructure. So basically as a rate message that came in from the markets through the pricing engine being sent out to the client as a quote, and then the subsequent order that was sent back in. So I'm just clicking on the multi-hop analysis button now. And here we can see that sequence. So firstly, we have the ICAP rate message. It comes into the pricing engine. It takes 711 milliseconds to be sent out to the client. We then see a quote to order measurement. So basically the client has now sent an order in off the back of that quote, but it's taken them almost 2 seconds to do that. And then finally, within the broker, we see the execution report in response to that order being sent back in 3.5 milliseconds. So it's very clear now what's actually happened. The problem is actually on the client side, Now, they've reported stale quotes, but the reason they've had stale quotes is because they have a technology issue, and they're unable to keep up with the rate of the quotes that are being sent out to them. So they've actually signaled back to the pricing engine to slow down, which it has done, and that's resulted in a high latency of 711 milliseconds because it's been hanging on to the quote before sending. The clients then receive that quote, albeit delayed. It's then taken them almost 2 seconds to then send an order in off the back of it. Again, so that's consistent with the problem on their side. And then once that order comes back into the broker, it's processed very quickly, turned around in under 4 milliseconds. So that was a quick example of how you can use Corvil to monitor your entire FX trading environment, from the rates coming in from the market through your own internal infrastructure, and also getting a handle on the performance that the clients have on their side. Please feel free to check out some of the other videos that look at other asset classes and other Corvil technologies in more detail.